Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords, and the third time is I pray the charm. So it's the third time I'm trying to do this video that has been in some way or another interrupted. But, okay, like the first time I tried it was almost 25 minutes long that I'd gotten into it, and then something happened that caused me to have to stop the video before I could actually conclude it. So let's try again. As you can see, I have picked up now, I finally got my own game, Baptism of Fire. Part of the disadvantage of living in South America is that I'm always the last to get my own products. And I got here the soft cover, and here's the hard cover. And I have no idea if this is the standard or the premium, because I never got clarification on that, but it sure looks premium to me, so I don't know. It looks lovely. Anyways, and these are the two books, the two formats of the books that you can get on Drive-Thru-RPG, but there's standard and there's premium color. I'm guessing these are premium, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, maybe somebody will explain it. Maybe I'll get that answer from Chris Miller about whether or not they're actually premium. The point is, though, I want to, you had to expect that I'm going to be doing several videos on this, because this is a big book. It's 375 pages. There's no way I'm going to do a single review of this. But what I am going to do is go through a number of videos, of kind of tutorial videos explaining what is in the book, and how I designed it, and why I designed it the way I designed it, and what you can do with it. And just hope that is inspirational for anyone who's hasn't picked up Baptism of Fire yet, or who has and is trying to work out some of the details of it. And of course, I'll be interested in hearing your questions or comments or things like that, and I will try my best to answer those. So we might as well get started. And one of the things I'm going to point out, okay, just in case, I think most of you guys who are watching this probably are aware, this is an OSR game. If you don't know what the OSR is, stop watching right now and check out my other video that is entitled "The OSR is Cutting Edge." It's quite early on in my timeline, so you could probably do a search for it. OSR is Cutting Edge, and you will understand what the OSR movement is. In short, it's games that are based on old school D&D. And also, most of you will know that I've already written an RPG about medieval authentic role-playing called Lion and Dragon. So what the heck is this, right? So Lion and Dragon is an RPG rule set for running medieval authentic games. And it doesn't have a setting, it's just rules, right? But it has an implicit setting, which is the medieval world, And more specifically, Lion and Dragon was built as the rule set for another book I don't have next to me right now, called Dark Albion, which is a setting book, doesn't have rules, just has setting, that is about the War of the Roses. And so this is a rule book built for a setting in the late Middle Ages. The War of the Roses was late Middle Ages. I have also written another setting book for Lion and Dragon, called Sword and Caravan, and that is set during the Third Crusade and along the Silk Road between the time of the Third Crusade until the time of the Mongol invasion. And so that would have all been during the High Middle Ages, the middle period, not the late, but the middle. Baptism of Fire is set in Piast, Poland, that's 11th century Poland, basically when the Polish state starts to exist, when the first Poland's chiefs take on Christianity, and then they begin to unify and Christianize Poland. And so a lot of it has to do with the struggle to Christianize Poland in that century, in the 11th century. And so Baptism of Fire is early medieval, okay? But on top of that, it is also the only one of any of these books I've named that is both combined a rule book and a setting book. It's a complete book by itself. That's why it's so big. And Baptism of Fire is a system that is almost the same as Lion and Dragon. It's very similar. So it is not a new edition even of Lion and Dragon. It is what you could say is an expanded edition that has also been slightly modified to fit the early Middle Ages in things like the equipment list, right? Like, so I don't have, here I have firearms, right? There are firearms in Lion and Dragon, because by the end of the War of the Roses, there was not only cannons but also rifles being used in in that war. So I had to put that in the equipment list. Here, well, there isn't even crossbows, so it's a much earlier period. The crossbow had been invented by them, but it just wasn't in Poland. So that is the difference, and I'm going to point out in particular in these videos what are the areas where you have differences between Lion and Dragon and Baptism of Fire. So in the start here, I start with an introduction that is very similar to the introduction in Lion and Dragon, and I point out what are the default assumptions of medieval authentic. So in the first place, I want to explain, because some people still seem to be getting this wrong, that when I say medieval, when they hear medieval authentic or somebody else has told them about it, they end up thinking this is a game that has no magic, it has no monsters, it's just like the real world in the Middle Ages. No, that's a historical game. That is different than a medieval authentic game. Because a historical game is not trying to recreate the world of the Middle Ages as the people of the Middle Ages saw it. It's trying to recreate our world in the Middle Ages. Okay? Whereas a medieval authentic game is the world as it was understood. So your player character is part of the medieval world as medieval people understood it. And the medieval world as people understood it had magic. It had miracles. It had monsters. Everybody knew that those things existed. Everybody knew that there was a god, right? Everybody knew that there were demons. All of those things were an essential part of the medieval paradigm. And so like you wouldn't be playing in a medieval world where there's no such thing as magic, where magic doesn't work, right? Magic has to work for people to be able to be in the medieval paradigm, in the medieval way of thinking. It's an assumption. So I'm saying that the paradigm is the most important thing. And so in this game, you are going to see there are monsters of various kinds, in the game, right? That are real things that you will have to fight, okay? And there's magic that is real magic, and there's miracles that are true miracles, okay? Besides that, the other stuff is stuff that I've, again, is already in Lion and Dragon. Most of you are probably going to know this, but, social status is really important. Unlike a lot of D&D games I've seen, it really matters if your character is a peasant or a city dweller, a knight or a noble. Like those are people are going to be treated totally differently based on those. So it's a very important mechanic of the game. Religion, there is an absolute belief in religion. Religion is something super serious to everybody in the setting. And in this section in particular, I do somewhat of an explanation of why Christianity ends up winning, right? Now, I want you to know that in this game, I do not present Christians as evil and pagans as good, or pagans as evil and Christians as good. Neither of the two, okay? What I do say is that most of the average people are basically good people, right? Like the Christians are basically good people. The pagans are also basically good people that don't want to give up the faith of their fathers. The Christians are basically good people who have found a religion that offers them so much more than the other one did, and that has a spirit of truth within it that they feel the other one doesn't. And so, here I explain why Christianity would have been successful in this period, what it was that made it successful. And it's not by force and fire and sword, right? It's not really that. I mean, there were of course times when there were forced conversions in the Christian world. That did absolutely happen, and some of it later on happens in the area of Pomerania and in other countries, in what becomes Prussia. So, that did happen, but that's not really the cause of the success. The success is that in fact, Christianity offered a better deal to ordinary people than paganism did. Life is cheap. One of the things about my games, whether it's Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire, or well, pretty much any of my games, is that there is no resurrection, right? Like there's no raise dead spell. There's no magic that'll bring you back when you die. And the critical hit system means that it's easier to die. So life is cheap, right? Magic is rare. Now, this doesn't mean that there isn't any magic. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get any magic in the game. On the contrary, there are classes that start with magic in the game, right? It's that magic is complicated. There are people, but there are also characters that start with miracles, right? And you can be a saint in this game, literally like a holy man who has miraculous powers and is there to do good. And of course, he has to keep being good to be able to keep having those powers, right? But what it means is that like there is, what you don't see is people throwing around spells everywhere, or magic shops where you can buy a full kit of, you know, magic armor so you have immunity to everything. And, you know, this isn't 3rd edition, guys, right? This is a game where magic items are rare. You know, they're harder to get, they're harder to find. And that makes, and what that does is that it makes even small magic items or unusual magic items have a whole other level of significance, right? And the magic itself is complicated to do, right? So you have to pre-plan it. You have to think it ahead. There's not really a fireball spell in this game, right? So it's not that simple. And finally, civilization is survival, right? All your characters would understand that a world that doesn't have a hierarchy is going to collapse into the worst kind of chaos. And everybody's just, in this setting in particular, everybody's just coming out of it. The early Middle Ages is the end of the Dark Ages, which is the apocalypse, the hundreds of years of complete shit that happened after the collapse of the Roman Empire, okay? Now we get into the character creation part. And here we have, the main thing I want to say about this is that character creation in my games is almost entirely done by random rolls. It doesn't have to be, though. If you don't want to, like if in the social class you would roll, and you in theory in the default version you could be everything from an outcast all the way to a magnate, right, which is like somebody who's at the very top of the aristocracy. But if you're a DM and you say, no, I want all my characters to be either like knights or nobles, that's fine. You can do that, right? You guys can modify this game any way you want. I've sometimes had some people that are like, I think some of them are like intentionally trying to like see if it'll poke at me or something. And they're like, oh, you know, I'm combining Baptism of Fire with Cyberpunk, right? I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds fucking great. You know, like I don't understand how people would think that I wouldn't think that's cool. You know, if you want to try it, go for it, right? And like I've presented the game the way I think is the best measure for it, but you as the DM have to decide how to best apply it in your game, okay? So there are several social classes that range from outcast to serf to peasant to city dweller, knight, and noble. And those classes each have, they're important. They each have important differences. They each have important social roles. They each get different starting background skills. Character creation is really fast in this game because all you do is some rolls and you've got the character. Then you just have to figure out what he is. And I'm of course opposed to 50-page backstories for a level 0 character, right? But what I am not opposed to is prior events, which is to say a single prior event, some small thing, becomes a core part of the beginning of the development of a personality of your character. And after that, it should all be further determined by your role playing in the actual campaign, not by you writing up a 50-page novel for your DM to read, right? The prior events tables in Lion and Dragon had 40 options. Here, I think it was 40. Here you have 80 options, and they're on 4 different subtables. And the subtables are not the same. They are increasingly rare, right? So subtable A is pretty normal stuff for the most part. Like heartbreak, your character was rejected by a woman, right? Or pious, your character is religious, he's got a +1 to theology, right? Stuff like that, right? Foreign ancestry, you know, one of your ancestors came from Slovakia or something, right? Subtable B gets a little bit stranger. Not terribly, but it can have some unusual ones, right? You can have, well, okay, traveled abroad, so you've been to another place, you've learned this. That's pretty normal. You know, sent to the tower, so you were imprisoned at some point. You were accused of a crime, whether or not you committed it. You were either innocent, escaped, pardoned, sentenced, or served time. You know, you and the DM have to work that out. Your character gets a +1 to saving throw versus diseases because of his horrible imprisonment, right? Or my old party are dead, right? This one is actually means you start as level 1 instead of level 0 because you were in another group and everybody in that group died except you, right? When we get to section C, we get into more unusual stuff still. You know, lost at sea, saved the Lord's life. You know, you've got an instant contact there. Your guy was a smuggler. You have the uncanny ability to sense when the weather is going to get bad. You know, that's a very useful skill in this game, actually. We have a character in the Sword and Caravan game that has that, and he's been very useful with it. And then D is like the weirdest shit, right? It's like survived lycanthropy. You're an ex-lycanthrope, you know. Heretical parent, super famous relative. You were in an arranged marriage, you know. You survived the plague. Madness prone, you know, all kinds of really, really crazy stuff, right? Divine visions. So there you are, even though with like the final one being like escaped from the fairy realm with the table of consequences for it. Next we get to character names. So again, this is being a medieval authentic game. Like you can have people make whatever names they want, but if you're doing it in a medieval authentic way, why wouldn't I put a list of the common names of that time period in Poland, male and female? Just like in Lion and Dragon, I did that with the most common names in England, Wales, and Scotland in the 15th century. Right here, it's in the 11th century. These were the names. There are some names here that you'll never, you know, or almost never see in Poland today because they're very old-fashioned names. Because some of them are Slavic names, and a lot of these Slavic names were replaced later by Christian names, right? So there's, I don't think there's a lot of women that are going to be called Gestobrona these days, right? They might be called something like Magda, right? which is a Christian saint name, right? And same thing here, you know, like I don't think there are going to be an awful lot of Wirsbants in the men that are called Wirsbant in Poland today, because they're named stuff like Tomasz, right? Which is the name of a saint, or it's the name of a saint, or you know, any number of other saints' names. You know, Piotr is Peter, right? And Pavel is Paul. Those are names that were not originally Slavic names. They've become Slavicized Latin names of, you know, of apostles in that case, right? Then you have the noble tables. These are the, you know, only noblemen really had like last names, and so these are the names of the clans. So these are all real clans, and the information on it is all real, including stuff that is real but may or may not be true, which is to say opinions about the house. Okay, so for example, because you know, all of these, or not all, but most of these houses of Polish nobility still exist today, and I don't want someone who say is from the Herb d'Oliva to be mad at me personally because I claim that the D'Oliva have an excessive tendency towards drink and bribery, because those aren't my words, okay? This and any of the other comments that I make in here that are like about specific things, right? Like Labech are peace-loving but resistant to any outside authorities, right? This is not stuff that I invented. It comes from one of the earliest Polish armorials, one of the earliest Polish guides to the aristocratic clans. Okay, so these are all things that I've taken right from some monk who had clearly certain grudges against certain families, because, you know, most of them don't come out very good, right? There are some that are like, oh, they are loyal to the crown. Okay, then but no other comment, right? But then there are others where it's just crazy, right? Like, well, the one that we had before their D'Oliva is a very good example. And yeah, there's, you know, some of them get less information than others. Some of them have the story of how the house was created. But anyways, if any of your characters are nobles, knowing what house they are is going to be very important, because suddenly you're, you know, doing Games of Thrones shit there, you know, potentially. Then characters in this game, just like in Lion and Dragon, in Baptism of Fire, they start at level 0. And when you complete your first adventure, as determined by the DM, that's when you become level 1. Selecting a class, you can see there's character minimum requirements and attributes to play a class, and some of them are going to be different than others, right? You know, you have the Archer requires Strength 7, Dex 9, right? Holy Warrior, Wisdom 9, Strength 9, Witch Hunter, Intelligence 9, Strength 9. And some people are saying, well, I've seen people say, well, the Holy Warrior and the Witch Hunter are overpowered. Well, they're not really. No, statistically, for example, a fighter against either of those two is still going to be better than they are at fighting every time by the time they're like level 9 or 10. A Holy Warrior or Witch Hunter will be very good at fighting compared to most other classes, but that makes sense because fighting is one of the things they do. They're mixed classes, right? The Holy Warrior fights and has miracles, right? And the Witch Hunter fights and knows magic. Okay, so they're combined classes, and they can do certain things very well. But you know, in this game, it's all about the niche protection, right? They have their area. So a Witch Hunter fighting a specific type of monster that is on his list of monsters he's trained to fight will possibly do better than a fighter of the same level. Same thing with the Holy Warrior fighting pagans or heretics, right? Or fighting to protect innocents, because he gets certain things that he can theoretically do if he's fighting to protect the innocent, you know. But in other circumstances, the fighter is always going to be better, right? So characters generation, level 0 generation is pretty straightforward. A thing about saving throws, because some people have been commenting this in some of the other Baptism of Fire videos I've seen. So Baptism of Fire and Lion and Dragon, both of them, neither, and you know, all my games actually, do not use either the 3rd edition reflex will, Fortitude reflex will saves, nor does it use the old D&D paralysis, poison, wand, breath weapon, and magic or spell saving throw. Instead, it uses a single saving throw number, which is like the oldest D&D mechanic there is. So characters start with a base save of 16 minus their charisma modifier. So if your charisma modifier is positive, that brings down that number. If it's negative, it brings it up. And why charisma? Because it reflects whether God likes you or not. Yeah. So the saving throw number is what you have to roll or higher on a d20, just like you would expect. And then in the course of the game, there are going to be times as you level up that your saving throw DC can go down, but there's also going to be often more occasions where your character will instead get a bonus to a certain type of saving throw. So he can end up getting, for example, +2 versus spells, right? So then he rolls, the difficulty number is always the same, but the modifier he has might be higher to save versus poisons or to save versus magic than it is to, I don't know, save versus area effects or something like that, all right? Alignment, the game has 3 alignments, law, neutral, chaos. Alignment is important here, of course. There are certain restrictions. Holy men and holy warriors must be law aligned. Scum Rosny cannot be law aligned. Everybody else can choose what alignment they are. Age and appearance, this is one of the few things you do get to decide within limits dictated by the DM. Sex, family. So in this game, there is a mechanic for figuring out, because in a lot of cases in the medieval world, your family is a very important thing. And the higher up you are, the more important they become, of course. Because at the very top, you're talking about the guys that have, armorials written to them by disgruntled monks, right? Those guys, their family is super important, right? But even if you're like a Grodnik, if you're from the city and you're of a wealthy family that's a merchant class or something, those people are going to have contacts, right? It's going to be important to know who's still alive and who isn't. So there's a whole mechanic here for determining what your character's starting family looks like, Then you have starting equipment, which is done basically just by outlining by social class, again, what you end up having. Though you also start with some funds, which is considered to be basically your entire worldly possessions, unless you're one of the nobles, in which case it's just chump change. And that's basically as far as I really wanted to get at the beginning here, because next we're going to go into the individual character classes, and I'll tell you about those when the time comes. But anyways, this is the first step. We're only up to page 35, so in theory we could end up having like 10 or more of these videos. But I hope you guys are going to like this. You send me your questions. Send me any comments you have about Baptism of Fire. I will try to get to them in the various videos I do with like tutorial info about baptism of fire. I'm going to try, this was the most simple part of it, but I'm going to try in later parts to give you a lot of design analysis where I tell you why I did the things I did, and also some possible hints and tricks and tips and what have you in different situations to help you improve your experience of playing Baptism of Fire. So if you haven't picked it up, now's the time. Pick it up before I put out my next video. The link is in the description section of this video. You just expand the More button if you're on the app, and you'll see links to all of my products, including Lion and Dragon. We got Baptism of Fire, Sword and Caravan, Star Adventurer, World of the Last Sun, the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, Invisible College, all kinds of stuff. All of them are on there. But especially, obviously, check out Baptism of Fire. Find out what the buzz is, why it's so popular. It's been super, super well received, and I'm so happy to hear about it. I'm happy now that I'm hearing about a lot of people that are playing it. Tons of people who bought it. Lots of photographs people have sent me of them getting it. Most of them getting it before I did. But here we are. That's the situation. And, do check out my other stuff too, including my Pundit Files series, which is a PDF series. If you can't afford, because, these days books are pricey, and let's say you can't quite afford the Baptism of Fire Deluxe hardcover or something, you can check out the Pundit Files. I make a new Pundit Files every 2 weeks. They're only available on the Red Room store, unlike Baptism of Fire. Baptism of Fire is available on DriveThruRPG, but the Red Room store has the Pundit Files, and each issue is a new topic in OSR stuff, and the latest one now is Medieval Authentic Traps, where I talk about historically authentic traps, where I talk about historical traps and how they worked and what's different from, how a lot of RPGs have traps, and there's some you'd think, oh well, that would be there's probably less creativity, but there are some areas where there's a type of creativity that you don't often see in a typical dungeon. So it's a very interesting book. But if you don't find that one so interesting, then go back to check out the earlier issues. You got stuff there like the Invisible College 1930s campaign. If you've got Invisible College, you want to check out that book. Or Jousts and Horses, which is a book that has rules and the history of medieval jousts. And it has this incredible guide to horses done by the Mad Hermit, who is the publisher of Pundit Files. That is just an incredible source book to give a lot of life and personality to horses in your game, to the horses your characters have with them. So check out that one, right? Or check out any of my other ones. There's a martial artist class for Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire in one of the issues. There's lots and lots of them. You're going to find something you like at this point, because we're on number 13, I think. So there's already a baker's dozen of choices for you. And any one of the Pundit Files is only $3.50. Okay, just $3.50. You can have the Pundit Files. Each one, $3.50. That's it. All right. So be sure to check that out. And in any case, share this video anywhere you can. Thank you very much. Currently smoking, or about to smoke. As you can see, I have not lit it yet. I've been very patient through three tries. Usually I do everything in one cut. This time I had to do it in 3 tries. This is a Peterson. This is a Peterson oversized poker. I think it's part of the Sherlock Holmes series, but I'm not sure. With Argento Natural. Thank you very much.